Can you see it from their point of view? I think that's always the thing. Can you put yourself in someone else's position, and no matter what you think about it and however right you might be, but why are they thinking what they're thinking?
Hey, I'm Osama, and this is the NAİMİ STUDİO podcast. Our mission is to help people cultivate meaning through creativity. We're a small team right now, just a father and son, currently focused on building an archive of unique visual pieces inspired by conversations with people from all walks of life. The pieces you see behind me were inspired by today's conversation and were created in an attempt to distill some of the key insights that emerged. Our hope is that they'll act as visual metaphors or prompts to help you consider the relevance of these insights in the context of your own life and the meaning that you experience. Our guest today is Dr. Gareth Steed. Gareth is a plant scientist turned innovator who's helped shape young minds in the classroom and the minds of decision makers in the boardroom. Gareth's PhD research at Cambridge University focused on understanding the circadian rhythms of cereal crops like wheat. But today, we take a much broader look at the lessons that he's learned in the transition between different chapters of his career and his life. If you share Gareth's love for cricket, then you're in for a treat, as we discuss its benefits in helping build community between people who'd otherwise never meet. We even managed to weave in some Japanese poetry, the joys of fatherhood, delicious home-cooked meals, and a whole lot more. So let's get into it.
Right, Gareth Steed. Welcome to the NAİMİ STUDİO podcast. I don't even know if that's going to continue to be the name for it, but let's just go with the NAİMİ STUDİO podcast for now.
Thank you very much.
Firstly, why are we having shepherd's pie?
I think when you ask the question about food and what food would you like others to try, I think when I think of food, I'd had the conversation with my wife Nicola a few times about, the electric chair meal that you would have just before. And I always fall back on shepherd's pie because I think it consists of all the things that I like in a way that's very homely and warm. So you've got potato, you've got mince, you've got carrots, potentially you might have some peas, onion, all the good veg together in one sort of warm, succulent, delicious dish. And when I think of childhood and things that my mum would cook, some of the things, hopefully she's not listening, would be very bland. But it was the one dish that if it came out, I'd be really happy. Yeah, and still to this day, very much enjoy. And I think it's underrated. I think people look at some traditional British food and think, it's not for me, it's boring. But I think everyone should eat more shepherd's pie or cottage pie, depending on your mince variety.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? When you first said cottage pie, my mind leaped to beef, right? Like beef mince. Sorry, no, you said shepherd's pie, but my mind went to beef. But to me, I've always enjoyed the lamb version of it.
Yeah, I think I in my head, the lamb version is very tasty. And when I think of lamb, it feels more, not posh, but a bit more fancy. Lambs tends to be a bit more expensive. So I think when we were children, sometimes it'd be lamb, but often it would be beef because it was a bit cheaper.
Well, what we've got to look forward to is a ratio of about 1 to 0.5, like 1 part lamb to half beef.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
With bacon.
Oh.
And I took the inspiration from your sort of second tier choice.
Yeah.
Well, not second tier choice, but the other option that you put, which was the Irish cabbage. With the bacon. So what we're going to do is we're going to have cabbage and leek in the potato topping. Yeah. And then bacon is actually in the thing. So I've tried to...
That sounds very good.
Tick a few boxes. But I appreciated your honesty with saying you just can't get the same bacon in the UK as the Irish one. I mean, tell us about that cabbage and bacon one.
Yeah, so we tried. So Nicola would, if you asked Nicola what's your favourite dish, she would say cabbage and bacon, which when you someone says that to you, does not sound great.
I disagree.
Yeah, I mean, but then I had it when one of the first times we went out to Ireland. She'd always insist that her mother or father would cook it for her at some point, and it is absolutely delicious. Like the bacon is, they call it cooking bacon, I think, or it's also back bacon, but like a big, almost like a gammon-like bit of bacon that you boil very slowly in salted water. And yeah, that served with cabbage and sort of baked potatoes with the skin still on and a lot of butter on It's actually really tasty.
Oh my goodness.
But we have tried to do it a few times in the UK, and I guess the exact cut of bacon seems to be a bit harder to find, / we don't know what we're looking for because it's called different things. So we'd never achieved the same, I guess you call it perfection, that you get in Ireland. But yeah, it's one of the staple traditional dishes, which I think wouldn't excite the millennials or the Gen Z. Yeah, definitely wouldn't excite Gen Z, but it's very good.
But all of that just enhances the value even more, right?
I think so, yeah.
If Gen Z can't make a claim to it, and no one other than if you're in Ireland can make a claim to it.
Yeah, I guess it becomes more special.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I should probably give you a chance to actually introduce yourself, Gareth, instead of making you talk about pie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the first thing is how would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. What a great question. One that I hadn't thought of beforehand. I would say my name's Gareth. I am a 35-year-old mother, not a mother, father of one. I work as an innovation consultant at Innovator Technology, which is how I know your good self. Former teacher, former PhD, postdoc, plant scientist, amateur sports enthusiast. That's probably, I guess that's how I describe my full self.
Excellent. With that in mind, if this was a movie with a young Gareth as our hero, what do you think would be the opening scene of that movie?
Wow.
Like where does this story begin?
What I'd love that to be, right, is the setting is Lord's Cricket Ground. It's the last over of the 5th Test match of an Ashes series, and we're tied 2-2 with the Aussies, and we need to take 1 wicket, and I run up to bowl and I take the wicket and we win the Ashes. That would be my story. So it's fictional. I've never been that good at cricket, but that's how I'd love to be portrayed. And then carried off with the little urn that you win if you win the Ashes. That I would love that.
I was going to say, like, how come you missed winning the Ashes out of your introduction?
Just come in, yeah.
I think that's a great start to the movie.
I think so, yeah. And then the rest of the movie could be like one of those where you then go back through the story of how you got to that moment, I think that would work. Yeah, I'd never thought of that before, but actually I quite like it. For me, not sure there'd be an audience for it, but I would watch it.
Do you know what? Let's go with it. Okay, so we've won the Ashes, and what are the chapters that are subsequent to that scene? How do you go from winning the Ashes to becoming a teacher?
Yes, that's a good question. How do you go?
You scuppered yourself here, guys.
Yeah, something's gone terribly wrong. I guess that would be the zoom back into sort of what shaped you into how you got to winning the Ashes. I mean, I did when I was teaching. I was very much playing a lot of cricket at the time, so the two did tie in, just not at a professional or international level, obviously, because then I wouldn't have been teaching. But yeah, I guess it would have been the running the cricket team after school, then rushing off to play cricket myself. That I guess that's how it would fit in. Like cricket was everything. Climaxing in that point in the film, which I now very much like.
I feel like we could create quite a story here just around. Is there a name for someone who wins the Ashes or like a winning team?
Hero, legend. God. I think the prestige that comes with that, in 2005, England won the Ashes against Australia in a very close test series. And I think the players that were in that team are very well remembered. A lot of them got MBEs or OBEs because of what they did in winning that Ashes series. So I think that's the kind of kudos that you could get.
Wow.
Which I'd quite like, actually, I think.
Is that to do with the fact that it was just a really tough Ashes that year?
At that point in time, it'd been a long time since England had beaten Australia. So Australia were very dominant and they came with a good side. And I think everyone knew it would be close. It was one of those sporting events that went on for a few months because cricket takes a long time. And every match was really close. It wasn't like, one team won one match by a massive margin. It was always down to the wire. And I think that's why, it was remembered, which is why I think the film thing, the great thing would be that very last moment. It's like scoring a goal in the 95th minute to win the FA Cup or something. That would be the cricketing equivalent of it.
I mean, what an honour to get a knighthood as well after all that. That must have been a huge thing for all their families and absolutely incredible. One of the key things I'd love to speak to you about today, Gareth, is the transition between the different chapters of your career, at least. So from being a teacher to being a PhD researcher and now an innovation consultant, and trying to dig into what compelled you to make those, I guess, transitions, and thinking broadly about what the similarities and differences are between those different experiences. Let's try and take it in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
The first thing would be, what brought you to teaching in the first place?
Yes, trying to keep it into reasonably bite-sized chunks. I loved playing cricket as a sort of a child and a teenager, and as soon as I could, I got my coaching qualification, primarily to sort of give something back and contribute to the club where I'd got a lot out. And there was a scheme at the time, it was called Chance to Shine, and the county paid clubs to send coaches into primary schools and secondary schools to do their PE lessons, where you were then getting them to play cricket, which often wasn't played much in schools because the PE teachers or teachers in a primary school wouldn't be so familiar. If you're going to do a sport in the summer, you do athletics or something. So I loved doing that. I really enjoyed it. I think I've got some really good memories of those summers going in with like friends of mine that I'd grown up with, teaching kids how to play cricket. I was like, yeah, this is really good. Generally, even though I think a lot of children don't like cricket, they like being outside. So it was a nice experience. So I had that in my mind. I actually enjoyed explaining cricket and seeing the kids improve. Went to study biochemistry at the University of Surrey, which seemed like a logical decision at the time. But it was a logical decision at the time. I was quite good at science. I was also good at history, but I thought, whilst I preferred history, my honest rationale was, if I do a history degree, the only job I'll be able to do is a teacher. So I'm not going to do that. I will do biochemistry, where I should have lots of job options afterwards. It's very funny how things work out. And then undergrad at Surrey, they're very big on their third year sandwich placements. So you get industrial experience, you see what the real world's like. And I was very keen to do this because I think it's important whenever you can to sort of try before you buy. So especially with jobs where, it can sound like one thing and then when you start doing it, it's actually very different. So I did that at GlaxoSmithKline in Harlow, and this would have been 2009-ish. The first half of the year was absolute bliss. Loved it. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to work in an industrial lab, and I want to do science. It's cool. I'm earning a bit of money, which at the time, you're not earning a lot of money at that age. I just loved the job. And then the second half of the year was a previous financial crash. It was a difficult time, and they made about 80% of the staff I worked with redundant because they were changing the direction of the business, which I've now a lot later now in my current role. You see it quite a lot, actually. There's a lot of reorganisations in these big companies. And I didn't enjoy that. I thought there were very good people that I was surprised that this was like the second or third time this had happened to them, and thought, it's not how good you are, it's the luck of the draw. Don't like that. So when I went back to final year, I spoke to a few people. My dad knew, because he came in a shop, a deputy head teacher at a local secondary school. Spoke to him. He was really nice. Said, well, why don't you come along and see what it's like? And my thinking there was, as a teacher, unless you do something really bad, you're never going to be out of a job, especially in the south of Essex, where there was a general shortage of science teachers. And I thought, I like working with kids and teenagers. I've really enjoyed the cricket coaching. It seems like a good natural fit. I'd enjoy the explaining. It's great working with them. And that was sort of my rationale. So I applied for a few. Well, actually, I think I just applied there at the beginning of final year for a scheme that's now defunct, the graduate teacher program. The thing I liked about that was I didn't have to do another year at university where I'd get more debt to the PGCE. I'd learn the third year as undergrad, you learn an awful lot more on the job than you do in a classroom. Even for science, when you could say, well, it is more of a classroom thing. But actually the stuff I was learning in the lab and how all the knowledge interacted together or came together. And it wasn't just you did a little bit of molecular biology or you did a little bit of chromatography. And there were two very separate things. Actually, in reality, all those branches come together. So I thought, well, for teaching, it'd be much better to learn that in the classroom than it would in a lecture theatre with someone that hasn't taught for 10 years telling me how to do it. So got on a scheme where I was employed by the school. I did a few days in another school within the area to sort of learn how to teach, and then the rest of the time was learning on the job. So I was very keen on that because I got paid at the same time. So I think I finished university on the Friday, and then the Monday I was in this, started working in the school. Yeah, so that was my rationale. Basically, avoid redundancy. something safe that I think I might enjoy.
Well, it's a good motivator.
Yeah.
But I'd love to come back to that point of explaining, because I think that's a characteristic of yours that I admire and have been like hugely inspired by, is your ability to explain complex things and adapt the way that you're explaining things depending on the audience.
Oh, thank you.
Which I imagine was incredibly useful in teaching and continued to be very useful in consulting.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I was just not this Thursday, the Thursday before, I went back home and saw a show with Professor Brian Cox. It was like a physics lecture in Southend-on-Sea, and I went with he's no longer a teacher but was my teaching mentor and has been a firm friend ever since, and we were talking about just teaching in general, which he's found very useful in the career that he's now in. He works at Ofgem. He's like, people are very praiseworthy of the skills actually I think almost all teachers would have, like, which is that ability to break down complex ideas to suit your audience, and then change depending on who you're talking to very quickly, because it could even be within the same classroom, how you explain those concepts to try and hit home as best you can. And then read the feedback, which often isn't, oh, I don't understand that. It's not that often, actually. Well, sometimes kids would say that, but you know, a lot of people don't want to admit they don't understand things if they've just had something explained to them. So you learn, and I don't really know how you learn it, but you do learn to then pick up on it. Actually, have they understood what I've said, or do I need to go again and break it down into a different way to get them to understand? And I think it's a good challenge of teaching, and it's something that I think most teachers would really enjoy doing. But thank you for picking up on that. That's very nice of you to.
Well, yeah, no, but it's just fascinating that you can actually that those skills become intuitive after a while.
I think,
especially if you're in a classroom where there's potentially quite a lot of chaos, or there's a lot of information that you have to be paying attention to, as well as the information that you're trying to convey.
Yeah.
So the ability to, I guess, soak up the things that aren't immediately obvious, or that people aren't saying, but you nevertheless know what they're feeling or what they need in a way. Like it's being sensitive to people's needs.
Yeah, it is. And it's like I really don't think I'm anything special in those regards. I think a lot of teachers would have that skill. I think the hardest thing often, and I guess it helped cricket coaching as well, where cricket, I would not have been the most naturally gifted person in the world. I had to work very hard to make the most of the little bit of talent I had. Some of my friends were much more talented than me. But then when you go to sort of break down those skills to, children that aren't choosing to do that, it's their PE lesson, is that realisation, actually, well, maybe it's not so obvious how you do this, or it doesn't come quite as naturally. And I think, so that was already, in a way, sort of ingrained into my head a little bit before I started teaching science. But yeah, I think for the classroom to function and for your job to function, you have to be able to almost put yourself into the shoe. I think it comes down to like empathy and thinking about, well, if I was you, what would I be thinking about this? And then try and, bridge the gap between what they need to know and where they are, and get that information to them in a way that can be sort of broken down and understood. And that, I guess, the variety of teaching in many ways is that you go from, I don't know, your bottom set year 10 class who are unmotivated, don't want to be there, and a low ability, maybe probably low literacy levels, which is then going to be a hindrance to actually anything you try to teach them or to access. And then you go from then to like your top set year 11s who, the majority of them probably go to university, they're very engaged. So you're like, okay, I've got to explain stuff to them. Then you've got your year 7s afterwards. And, these lessons could all be back to back. So you're going to really have to, how you talk to an intelligent 16-year-old is very different to how you talk to an 11-year-old that's just started the secondary school's terrified. So I think it comes down to empathy and to, trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And it's often harder to explain the things that you really know well than it is. So I guess the other nice thing about teaching, I was a science teacher, but really the thing I was most confident on was the biology. I was pretty good at chemistry as well. Physics, I dropped it after GCSE. So then having to teach that to a level higher than I did at GCSE was quite interesting. But probably some of my best lessons were those ones, because I really had to sit and work out what it meant myself to then explain it to the kids. And that, I think, got across a better message to them, made the lessons better than if it was something that I just, intuitively know because you've done it over and over and over again and you're very, very familiar with it. And as soon as you become over familiar with something, it seems obvious, and then you get lazy in how you explain things.
Yeah, I guess you would just sort of check out a little bit more than, it's I've certainly seen some if I give example of some lecturers on YouTube, you know, the lecture series where you feel as though you're trying to go along the journey with them and figuring out what the right way of thinking about this problem or this idea is, you feel a lot more immersed in it. Whereas if someone's sort of preaching to you from a place of, oh, well, this is just so obvious and so rudimentary, but I'm going to have to explain to you anyway. You're right. It just gives a completely different message to the kids.
It does. And it can be a bit of a turn off as well, I think. No one really likes to be preached to. I think if you're a student in a class, you want confidence that your teacher does know their stuff. And I think anyone that's ever changed schools or started teaching, you always get tested in that way by some of the smarter kids. I think, oh, I'm going to ask a few questions because we did learn this last term, but he doesn't know that. You know, that sort of thing. I think anyone that's taught would be able to relate to that.
Kids can smell fear.
They can smell fear, yeah. And that's the other thing you learn then is to look confident, even if inside you're not confident. And I know I taught in 2 schools when I started in the sort of move schools. I was terrified to begin with because you built up your reputation at the previous place such that you weren't having massive behaviour problems in your classrooms. You know, generally the kids were behaving and doing what you wanted them to do, and then you go somewhere different and suddenly you got to start all over again. And I remember the other class I got, they were a high ability year 10 class about to go into year 11. They loved their previous teacher and I wasn't their previous teacher. They were very sad that he'd left. So
big boots to fill.
It was big boots to fill. And I do remember after a couple of weeks thinking, have I actually made the right decision here? Because this is going to be really tough to win them round. I've got a couple actively saying, well, that's not how Mr. X would have done it. I think, well, I'm not Mr. X, so
I'm Mr. G.
I'm Mr. G, and you're going to have to, learn to live with my way of doing things. But you do then start questioning it, and I think that's again then when you start thinking, well, how can I modify what I'm doing to, suit the audience? And I think different subjects would be different as well. So science, up until GCSE, is very much you need to know X, Y, Z facts. It's not the science that you do at university. Although even the undergrads, I think to begin with, you need to know X, Y, Z facts, just in more facts. Actual science as a discipline in the workplace is very much about problem solving and using those disparate facts that you've learned to help you solve problems in a logical way. School isn't like that. So I think science, where you're just teaching the content and the facts all of the time, is quite different to a subject. My wife teaches English, where you are teaching facts, but it's also very skill-based. I think, your ability to interpret texts, for example, is quite different to how we would, or what they'd have to learn in science. And I guess then the challenge with the teaching science is it's very much foundational. It can get quite hard if you don't have the foundation facts to then access the higher level facts becomes challenging. Yeah. But that's the job. That's what you're getting paid to do, is to help those kids understand.
So on the theme of, I guess, bridging the knowledge gap for kids, and also, the information that you're getting from kids about when they are struggling with the concept or just generally trying to get in touch with what they need.
Yeah.
Whilst, like you said, looking confident and, I guess giving them the reassurance that you're the person that can help in that situation. What kind of practical things, if you can think of any?
Yeah.
Some sort of tells, and in some way I'm imagining, are there almost like archetypal types of confusion?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And this is where, again, by no means was I the best teacher in the world at all. So I don't want to sound like I'm, preaching as a great teacher, because I don't think I was. I think sort of the obvious, it's where you have to know the kids in your class. So you can, at the start of the year, you're given their pictures and you're given their names, so you can try and work out who they are, and you might sit them in alphabetical order so that you can learn the names more quickly. But part of it is getting to know them so that you, by default, know when a kid is on track and happy and doing well, and because you know them when it's not going well, and it might manifest itself in different ways. I mean, a typical thing you would get is, I don't know, you explain something to a kid and they go, yeah, I get it. And then obviously you're always looking for an output in a lesson. It's not like they turn up and you just have a chat and then they leave. There's going to be some output. It might be a worksheet. It might be answering some questions in their exercise book. It might be doing the practical. if you've explained it and you've got the nodding, and then you quite quickly notice there's no output, that suggests they haven't understood what you're talking about. Sometimes if it's low ability students, I'd find you get more disruptive behaviour if they don't understand what they're supposed to be doing. There's other reasons why there'd be disruptive behaviour as well. But, if they start chatting or they're just actively, trying to be seen to do something that's not the task, that would be a bit of a tell that they're not doing what they should be doing, or they don't understand what they should be doing, or they don't understand the content. And then I guess the other thing that tells you over a longer term is, well, how are they performing in tests? Because you're always kind of assessing. And even within a lesson, you should, I don't know how it's changed, but at the time when I was teaching, you were very much expected to be looking at demonstrating to anyone that came into your class that the children are making progress across the course of the lesson. So you were supposed to be stopping them frequently and checking for understanding and asking questions. So that would be another thing. But I think, a child that, how would you know if someone understands something? You've got that understanding in the present moment and actually understanding such that they've learned for the future. But you won't know for the future until you assess them or ask them the question later on. But in the moment, if they're sort of on task and they're working towards the output that you want them to do and they're not asking questions, that's generally a good thing. And so then it comes to, have you got the culture in the classroom where it's okay to ask questions and you're not going to get shot down, you feel comfortable doing so. And that's then, I think every teacher has a different way of doing that, but trying to build a comfortable, safe place where it's okay to be wrong, it's okay to question things. I'm not going to get annoyed if you don't understand something. And I'd start the year with the classes by saying I don't have many rules, but there's like a few rules that I have. Sort of one, if I'm talking, you don't talk over me because we're not going to get anywhere. But likewise, if you've got something to say and it's important, I won't talk over you. So that's going to work two ways. Second thing is I expect you to try. Whether you like it or not, you've got to be here. So put the effort in, have a go. If you don't understand, ask, because otherwise you're just wasting everyone's time. And then I'm trying to think if there was anything else. And then you've got to follow the school rules is the other thing. So, the management in the school, and this is actually quite a useful thing that I even see in consulting sometimes with perhaps difficult clients. You palm off the rules onto someone else. It's not you as the teacher that's made the rules.
It's the powers that be.
It's the powers that be. And kids, you can break those rules, right? And I might not agree with all of the rules, but let's say I do. But the problem is if one of my managers comes in, the head teacher, and sees that you're breaking a rule in my classroom, who do you think's actually going to get in trouble? It'll be me. So let's follow the school rules. I haven't made them, but we've got to fit in with them. So, if it's something about phones, then we've got to follow that rule. If it's about you don't do your homework and you get a detention, well, we've got to follow that rule. I can't treat you any differently. And I think it's sort of setting up those expectations, which I think everyone would do in some ways. I think the longer you've been somewhere, then you don't necessarily need to do that anymore because people just know.
You got an aura about you at that point.
Yeah, I can think of a few old colleagues that just, whether it's because they were large, physically imposing people, or feisty, just have an aura of either I'm not going to mess with this person, or they're just amazing. They've got that charisma that I just want to lap up what they're saying. Well, we could probably all think of teachers we've had like that, where you're just like, yeah, wow, you're really good. So once you set your expectations, again, the guy I saw a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about teaching, his advice to me was don't try and be perfect every day.
I think that's excellent advice.
Yeah, you can't. So we used to, if you had your lessons observed, which you would have, especially at the beginning, there used to be a grading criteria where your lesson could be outstanding. So everyone wants outstanding. It could be good. It could be, and good's okay. Good's fine, right? It could be satisfactory. Now, actually, badly named because satisfactory is not satisfactory, and or it could be requires improvement. So it was very similar to what were the Ofsted ratings at the time, is how your lessons would be judged. And he said to me, look, if you strive to be outstanding in every lesson and you try and have everything in that's going to make them amazing and engaging all of the time, you'll be dead by December. You just won't have the time. You'll be knackered. For each class, try and once a week. So let's say you see a class 3 or 4 times, have one lesson where it's really good. And you aim for it to be, you try and model some of the things that would be an outstanding lesson so that when you do have the observation, you don't have that thing of the kids going, we never do this, which obviously looks very bad. But then the rest of the time, just be satisfactory or good. Just get the stuff across them. It doesn't matter. But you'll garner their confidence if you consistently deliver over the course of prolonged time, really good lessons. And then the rest, just get through them, get the information across as best you can, but don't kill yourself trying to do the perfect lesson every time. You don't need to get the respect and confidence of the children, which I thought was really very good advice. He was full of good advice.
And I guess if you are reaching for an outstanding lesson, by nature, you're probably going to have less bandwidth to, deliver for other kids. So it's almost a little bit you've got to manage then.
Yeah.
The fairness of the high quality Gareth that you're giving to the kids. So it makes complete sense that you'd have to balance the good with the great.
Yeah, I think so. And the lessons when you knew you were going to have an observation, which is really your performance review when you're a teacher. Your performance management is your outcomes of your observations, which are by their nature subjective, really. It could take you 2-3 hours to plan those lessons to make, have it really nailed down. So, yeah, I mean, if you're teaching 21, 22 lessons a week, you can't spend 3 hours planning each one and deliver them and then do the marking afterwards. I mean, you'd be working 90 hours a week. It wouldn't work.
No. And you don't get paid that much.
You do not get paid enough to work 90 hours a week as a teacher, despite what people would say about the holidays. Not the case.
So circling back to the low ability or the disruptive students, I'm curious to know, because I've heard you mention before about how teaching kind of gives you not just teaching, but some of your experiences have given you a good cross-sectional view of society.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fascinating benefit of teaching, certainly. Not just for the teachers, but I also think for the students. So I'd love for you to share your thoughts on that.
So I think there's something I reflected on quite quickly when I'd started teaching. So sort of my educational background, I went to the primary school I went to. I think at the time wasn't particularly good. There was some naughty students in that primary school who went on to do bad things. I mean, there were actually, the funny thing is, like, a couple of years below me, there's someone that's a now world-famous pianist who you would just never have necessarily thought that would come out of my primary school.
I think I was in a similar situation. The school that we went to, on one side in the same cohort, you had some people who ended up in Oxbridge, and you also have some people who are now either dead or in jail.
Yeah.
And diverse.
Yeah, and it was diverse. And I don't know, I mean, it was a relatively small primary school. It was like, I don't know, maybe 25 to 30 in my class. And there was one class per year group. It wasn't a great primary school. I went to a good secondary school. I got into one of the grammar schools in Southend. So sort of scraped in by the skin of my teeth. But then you're in an environment where everyone's pretty similar to you. I mean, quite a lot of them had perhaps had sort of more wealthy families, but I think otherwise, like, parents were generally motivated they thought education was important, otherwise they wouldn't have made you do the test in the first place to get in. And then you go off to university, again, you're around similar like-minded people. It might be from different parts of the country, which I hadn't seen before, or different countries in the world, but ultimately, you're all interested in the science, that's why you're there, and you're quite bright. So I think for most children, even if you're at a comprehensive school now, for the core subjects, you're almost definitely going to be streamed into like, top set, middle set, bottom set, or whatever, based on your ability. The chances are when you get to GCSE, your options will depend on your ability. So if you are a low ability student or low academic ability student, you're not going to be able to pick the same subjects that the high academic ability students can pick. So you can quite quickly not interact with those other students. You might see them around, you might see them in your tutor time, but actually you're not really interacting with them. And I think that's the cool thing about sport, is that is the thing where you can get the crossover. So I went into teaching having, people I played cricket with were from all walks of life, doing all sorts of different things, where it didn't matter. You were there because you liked playing cricket. But yeah, when I started teaching in a comprehensive school within Southend, which is the grammar school area. So if you've got your pool of local students, most of the top academic ability students will go to the grammar school. There's then, of which there was 4, 2 boys, 2 girls. There's then a selective Catholic boys and selective Catholic girls school, which is where some students would go if they didn't quite get into the grammar school. And then there was the comprehensive school. So you'd already done a lot of the filtering that in Cambridgeshire might happen through streaming within the school. And I remember I was very, very surprised at how poor literacy, like for example, was in, you know, some 14, 15, 16-year-old students, where I just assumed, well, of course everyone can read at that age and they can read competently. But actually you realise very quickly that's quite a big barrier to learning for those people that can't read. You could be good at science verbally, and I had plenty of those, but you know, they got the concepts, they can remember most of the facts, but if they read the exam paper and they're not quite sure what the question means, they're not going to answer the question correctly and they're going to lose credit. And if that's happening across all of your subjects, you're not going to do as well as maybe you could if the exam was orally done or if you were just doing coursework.
And this is partly down to neurodiversity as well as just general literacy.
Yeah, I think
levels.
part neurodiversity, part, you know, like educational history. And then the other big thing, which again, I just hadn't really thought about, was you know, sort of your family home environment. I think the most frustrating children to teach were those that were not, you know, they didn't have a neurodivergence that would mean on paper you'd expect them to do poorly, but they had no intrinsic motivation to do well at school. And actually then that often boils down to parents that just don't value education.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. And there is I thought there was a surprising, that really surprised me, at like the number of that. And I think the sort of very low ability bottom students could be neurodivergence, in which case I think as a teacher, I went back to primary school. I had a really good teacher, year 5 and year 6, his name was Mr. Soanes. And he, I think because we weren't the best class that they'd ever had in the school, he was very big on it does not matter how clever you are in life, really. What matters is that you're like a good person, you've got a good heart, and you try at things and you're nice to other people. And if you can do that, you'll get on in life, whether you can pass exams or not. And I tried to, like, he also instilled in me a love of Ray Mears, the survival expert. It's like the better version of Bear Grylls, less flashy.
The OG one, right? Before
it was before Bear Grylls.
I do remember Ray Mears. It
Ray
feels
Mears.
like it's unlocked a bit of a memory.
Fantastic. And we used to watch Ray Mears on the telly on like a Friday, and then we'd go outside and do like Ray Mears building huts and things. And I think then when you're the teacher of the class, you accept that some students it's just not really for them. And it's kind of a shame then that the academic system pushes them into doing exams that they're not suited to doing, or that the schools make them do it because it might look a bit better in the league table, which is sort of a whole nother discussion. But then the other ones, the frustrating ones are, well, the ones you feel sorry for are those that have very unstable home lives, of which there's far more than I would have ever thought, where, you know, one or two parents might not be there, they might be in and out of care, they might be moving. You know, the outside of school is so chaotic that in many ways it's very surprising they've made it into school in the first place and they've got the right clothes on. So, of course, then, you know, they're struggling. And this is just something I had not seen since in primary school. You don't notice. You're naive to all these things. I think it's a wonderful age to be alive in many ways.
Yeah, there's just a sense of innocence about it.
A sense of innocence. It doesn't matter if, like, the kid is deaf or they have Down syndrome or, you know, XYZ. You just don't notice. You might notice the ones that are really naughty, but otherwise I don't think you notice. And then in secondary school, I'd been filtered away from, in many ways, those students that would, you know, be struggling with aspects of life outside of school. It really, that really surprised me. The lack of, parental engagement and promotion of education, it surprised me. And then things it sounds really bad, but I used to think that people to talk about ADHD, and I had thought, you know, it's not really a thing, or like it probably is a thing in a very small minority of people, but then it's just a stamp that is given to students to explain away like poor parenting. And then I taught children that have really bad ADHD, and I was like, actually, wow, this is a thing. And the same with dyslexia as well.
It's just debilitating, really.
It is. And you can't, and I do wonder now, so my wife says, I shouldn't say too much about what she says, but she would say that there's definitely a lot more diagnoses of these things now. And that does then, to a certain extent, you start to question, well, is proportionate real? How, you know, if things are on a spectrum, it's always hard to draw the line. Like, where do you draw the line? And there are benefits that can be conferred if you do have a diagnosis written down. So, for example, I believe it would be the case if it said you had like a certificate saying you're dyslexic or you have ADHD, you'll get 20% extra time in the exam, or you might get to use a laptop to type, or you might get a scribe to type. Now that could be very helpful actually for some students. So you can see why you might, as a competitive parent, chase a diagnosis. But I was really surprised to begin with, that sort of just the amount of apathy there was among some groups of parents towards education, where I don't think I would say my parents pushed me particularly hard, but it was always that you need to try your best, and if whatever that is, don't care, but you got to try. And actually, for quite a lot, there just wasn't that, and I found it very sad. And it's eye opening. And then I came to Cambridge, and again, like but even where we were yesterday evening, I think a very select.
So where were we yesterday evening?
So we were at a cocktail party at Aidan Poon's house. It was very nice. But, you've got such a... It was really nice. Everyone was very, very friendly. I'd never been to anything like this before, to the point where I really didn't have the clothes. I didn't have a jacket. But
nevertheless, you looked dapper.
Thank you very much, as did you. Made excellent cocktails or mocktails. I think even within that environment, like very well-read, articulate people, it's a very, very narrow band of society that's there. And it's a relatively narrow band of what's in Cambridge, which itself, I think that we would see is a narrow band of people. Now, there definitely
that's
are.
That's probably accurate, yeah.
Yeah, there are those of deprivation. And I know where my wife works, although you would think on paper there's not any deprivation here, actually they have the sort of the full range of places for where... like the metrics would say this is a like perfectly affluent area, there's no deprivation, right down to I think there's parts of Albury where it would be at the very bottom level of deprivation in terms of socioeconomic background of the children. So there is that range, but I mean you don't see it that much, and it's easy to forget that exists. And so I think teaching was it made me very grounded, I think, to what the world was actually like. And what society was actually like in the UK, where you might think these things of other countries. I'm not saying that I did, but you wouldn't think it of like your hometown where I was teaching. You think, it can't be like that. And I think I'd seen a little bit of it at cricket, but not really, because you're not talking about academia, you're talking about cricket or the football or what's going on that day.
You don't necessarily see the barriers when it comes to.
Yeah, no, you don't. I think there was like one of my friends that was the same age. We played loads of cricket together growing up. You kind of knew that he didn't have the most stable home life. Like sometimes he would be. I assume he's not going to listen to this. But like sometimes he would be dropped off, and he would be there in the car park before the meet at 9 o'clock in the morning, much earlier than everyone else, and just be crying because obviously something had happened. And you didn't pry too much, and you just got on with it. But you kind of knew that was a bit unstable. But you're not talking about how did you do in your maths test or your biology test. You don't care. Mm-hmm. That'd be actively frowned upon. So, yeah.
I mean, what I love about this sort of cross-sectional view, and what you've said about actually it comes down to are you a good person or not, is, well, I guess one of the principles that I'd love to try and maintain with this venture, or I guess a belief that I have, is when it comes to talking to people about their perspective on life, their perspective on what they find meaningful, there are pretty fundamental insights about the human experience that I think you can get from anyone. And it doesn't really matter how high on the subjective hierarchy scale it doesn't really matter how society places you in terms of these hierarchies. It's you have as much of a, how do I phrase this? Your perspective is as valuable as everyone else.
Yeah.
And I'd love to try and speak to people from all walks of life through this venture, because I find it, I guess the thought of only ever talking to experts quite sad in a way. So I don't know. I think I find it inspiring basically to think of how grounding those kind of experiences were for you, and how important that is for people to try and I guess, find an avenue in their own lives to connect with, the broader spectrum of human experience.
Yeah, there was definitely a time when I was teaching, and shortly after when I came up to Cambridge to begin with, and I did think, everyone should have to do a year of teaching, like not quite like national service, but something where you do see like all aspects of society. So maybe it could be teaching, maybe it could be like caring. Maybe I assume doctors would see the same thing, and nurses in their roles. Police officers would definitely see the worst or the poor elements of society, I guess, more frequently. But there was a period of time where I thought, it'd actually be really good. I think at the time when I first got to Cambridge, I thought it'd be really good for you to see like what the world's actually like, rather than in that small bubble. Although as I sort of spent more time here, I realised actually a lot of people are very sort of socially aware, maybe more so even than they would have been back home in Essex. They're certainly thinking about it, but it's always from a place of usually quite a fine or narrow band of society that you're interacting with, which is, I think, hard to avoid unless you're forced to do it in your job. I
do find it interesting to imagine a world where either everyone has this conscription of some sort to teach and to, I guess, build the empathy for people in different circumstances, but also balancing the extremes. So say if you do work if you're in a line of work where you are exposed to the more negative or destructive parts of human nature, you should be almost entitled to some time in your life where you can actually see that there's a lot of good as well. Yeah. Or, I mean, I don't think it would be great to try and swing it the other way and say, okay, well, if you're in a great line of work, then you should, get a good dose of the negative. That might not be a good thing, but it's just worth thinking about, I guess. Some people can have generally quite a narrow slice of reality. Yeah. I think about, we may have even spoken about this. I read a book not that long ago. It was called The Secret Barrister. So it was like an expose of the legal system. Actually, what you realise there, one, it doesn't get the coverage it deserves in the news, but that's an absolute car crash at the moment. We hear all the time about how broken the NHS is and the lack of funding, et cetera, which, generally, if you try and use NHS services, you see for yourself. But the legal system, which is something that we often less likely to interact with, is also very, very broken. And the people that are making the decisions about what should happen to people that have broken the rules, there's obviously a huge detachment there between the two groups. And I do sometimes wonder, like you say, I think everyone's perspective on life and their experiences is equally valid. You could objectively rank, I guess in a way you could objectively rank and say, well, X, Y, Z, actually this person's experiences have led to X, Y, Z things that really benefit humanity. They've discovered X, Y, Z, which is really cool. I think some people maybe, in a meritocracy, there's a real benefit in taking advice from the people who have, committed their lives towards a certain pursuit. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the perspective of others shouldn't be heard. You don't necessarily need to act upon, you don't need to take financial advice from someone who's a gambling addict. No. But that gambling addict would have a lot of insights that are concurrent with people from all walks of life, potentially. We could all arrive at the same insights despite living very, very different lives. And I guess who you choose to take advice from probably then shifts to the experts. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off there. No. It's interesting. No, I think you're right. You probably wouldn't take advice from someone with a gambling problem, but their motivations and why they're doing it, and so what's led them to the point is actually very interesting. So, because I'm aware that you're more than a teacher. Yeah, it is funny though, isn't it? I think at a time I would have thought, I think I said this before when we chatted. If you'd asked me when I was a teacher, to describe yourself, I'd be like, I'm very keen. I play for Benfleet Cricket Club. I'm a big cricketer. And now I ever find myself
I was doing it last night, just like recounting like teacher gossip stories, because they're always far more dramatic than...
Well, I was going to say, we could dip into that actually. So on a more lighthearted or absurd note, I'm sure in teaching you've been exposed to some devils and angels. You've probably been exposed to a lot of humor, a lot of absurdity.
Yeah.
The weird, the wonderful.
Yeah.
Maybe the unhinged.
The unhinged, yes.
You don't need to give away any specifics, but it'd be good to get a sense for, I guess, the extent of that absurdity.
Okay,
sometimes.
so the madness, yeah. Not always from students either. So I'd say a lot of absurdity came from the adults and the staff. Far more, so I think one of our former colleagues, one of my current colleagues, loves gossip, and he's always trying to find more gossip. Teaching was a hotbed of gossip. And I don't know whether it's because... I sometimes think about why, because I've spent best part of 7.5 years at the university. There was never any scandal really. And that 4 years of teaching, I still end up going back and going, oh yeah, when I was teaching XYZ happened, or there's a story from teaching, or this happened when teaching. And you think, well, now every year that passes in my life, it becomes a smaller percentage of the time of my life. And yet I still... I don't know, I think, people must get so fed up with me going, well, you never guess what happened when I was teaching. But for the weird and wonderful and wacky, I think with the students, the funniest things were often like the most unexpected. So I'll never forget. I'm probably not going to sound very funny, but I found it absolutely hilarious at the time. It was the first, I think it was year 10 or year 11 class. I didn't teach them all the time. It was in my training year, and they were on the laptops doing a research task. And we were talking, learning a bit about genetics and genetic modification and in vitro fertilization. And so you're walking around, checking what they're doing. And I walk at this kid who was just laughing, hysterically. And then tried to cover up his laptop screen. I was like, what's wrong? And it was, it was a lady just stood with breasts all over her. And he said, I wanted to see if you could cross a cow with a human. And I Googled it, and I've got a woman just covered in udders. And I was
with things like AI, that's just going to spiral out of control.
I was like, that's really funny. You get the funny things where a kid says something accidentally and doesn't mean it to be funny. So I remember we were doing year 7s, and they would present. It was quite early on in the year, and they were doing presentations about their favourite animals. And a girl who was very cute, very sweet, year 7 girl, 11 years old, stood up and said, "My favourite orgasm is an elephant." And obviously you got to... none of very few of the other children found this funny, because they didn't really know either. But I found it very, very, very funny. And those little tidbits, actually, I think the great bit about teaching was, and the worst bit, you could have the best laid plans for the day and they'd go terribly awry, but you would get some absolutely cracking, funny... some
howlers.
Yeah, and it's often the things that were most poorly planned that could go unexpectedly well. But it warmed your soul. It was so funny. Yeah, and it's just no 2 days. They said, the training, no 2 days will ever be the same. I think, that's a nice cliche. I could see that on an advert on the telly for teaching. But actually, it's kind of true. There's always something that really tickles you. But yeah, that's a few of them. I think I could sit down and probably write a book about having, again, only on a very small period of time, supplemented with my wife's stories, because she's got some absolute crackers as well. Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like the kind of place where you're really at the forefront of witnessing so many different aspects of the human experience, from triumph to heartbreak, tragedy.
Yeah.
And the full spectrum of good and bad, real personal development as well as real frustration and real struggle.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you're dealing with a secondary school anyway, and I actually don't know... I think there's always this thing. Primary school teachers, I could never teach secondary, and secondary school teachers often I could never teach primary. But yeah, secondary as well, when you think students get to 14, 15, 16, their emotions are heightened anyway. So, they're going through all sorts of dramas in their life, when really, as an adult, it's not drama. But to them, it's a drama, and it's a big deal, and they have their good days and they have their bad days. But you do... I think I would say from the other things I've done, the peaks and troughs of teaching, the peaks are much higher, but the troughs are much lower than sort of the other jobs. I think PhD postdoc was a lot more consistent, and even certainly Innovator is far more consistent in terms of like general mood. Some days are better than others. I mean, we've been in a few odd meetings, but like there's nothing like the lows that you might have teaching, or the sort of really positive highs as well.
Mm-hmm. So it's more extreme.
Very, very much extreme, and can be extreme from one lesson to the next. Is there?
Yep. One last thing that I wanted to touch on about teaching is, you mentioned how, well, certain kids might, how do I say this? It's clear that for many kids, you will have played not just the role of a teacher, but the role of a role model.
Yeah.
And is that something that you become quite aware of in the moment? And how do you try and deal with that? Is it a case of, trying your best to detach and acknowledge that there's only so much that you can do, whilst also, just being a human and realizing that you kind of can't in some situations avoid going beyond the call of duty? So.
That's a good point. It was said quite a lot during the training early on that you are going to be a role model for those students. So it's really important that you're like professional, you're approachable. They made it very clear that actually your primary role in many ways, like the most basic function of you, is to make sure the children are safe. So you're taught how to recognise if something's going on that means they're not safe outside of school, for example. So like, pick up on the signs of neglect, that if you notice changes which are pointed towards that, you need to do something about it. It's like your legal and moral obligation that you must sort that out, which is the thing when you go into it, actually I didn't really think about. So it is ingrained in you that you need to be a role model. I think the longer you do it, the more you, I don't know, you do feel it a bit as well. You can tell after a while, once you've built rapport with the students, like some of them are looking up to you, and then it's just important that you are, I think, consistent. I think one of the most important things for children growing up is consistency. Hopefully in their home life, but certainly sometimes for the ones we've said, like different areas of society, actually school might be the one bit of their day that's consistent. So it's really important then that they come to you and then they know they're going to have a consistent experience. And I can think of teachers I had where you were never quite sure what mood they were going to be in when you turned up. And it's quite stressful, actually. Is that teacher going to go ballistic at someone today, or are they going to be really funny and chilled out and it's going to be a nice lesson? I don't know. I've got no idea. Stood outside the door. And then you see them turn up like red in the face. You think, oh, this could be unpleasant. And I was quite conscious I didn't want to be like that. So I tried very hard, or as hard as I could, that even if I was having a bad day outside of school, I didn't want it to show. And as well, it wasn't as a secondary school teacher, I think sometimes there's a temptation. I mean, I notice it now supervising as well. Like if you've got a lot going on outside and you haven't quite managed to do something as well as you want to, you sort of explain to those students like why that hasn't happened. I've always felt with teaching, it wasn't really for me to, it's not for me to share my problems with the students. I just need to be as consistent as possible, even if I'm really angry or upset or something inside. They shouldn't. I want them to come to the class and kind of know what they're going to get. They might not like it, but hopefully, at least they know what they're going to get. So I think you do have that, like on you. And it's probably like, it's like since I've stopped doing it that you sort of notice that you don't always have the instant feeling, oh yeah, that's gone really well, or yeah, they really look up to me. But it's like, even now, like sometimes on sort of like a Facebook or something, I'll get a message from someone I taught 10 years ago saying, oh, I'm doing this now. I thought you might want to know. You're like, well, that's actually really cool. And
yeah, how do you feel in those moments? Because I guess that's where it all comes to fruition, really.
It's a bit mad. It doesn't happen so much now because it's been so long since. I stopped teaching in 2015. It is cool that you get some of them say, and I'm sure they say it's all their teachers anyway. But I chose to study like science at university because when I was in year 8, you were my science teacher, and I really made me like science. It was like that's really cool. That's really cool. Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah, you've really put them on the path in some cases, for their life calling.
Yeah,
and
I can
that's
think
quite special.
It is, and I can think of the teachers that I had that did the same thing, and you think of them in a very good way. I mean, I think one of the most surprising ones to me, there was a student that made my life quite difficult for a whole year, like bad behaviour and just generally not very nice. And then it was shortly after actually I'd finished teaching, I saw them outside of school. I was like, often I didn't mind bumping into students because they'd either cross the road and not talk to you or they'd say hello, because the vast majority of teenagers are, the decent people, the nice people. And I thought, it was one of the times I thought, please, I actually don't want to talk to you. And they came up to me and they said, I just want to say, like, good luck with what you're doing next, and like, thanks for everything you did last year. Sorry, I was a bit like difficult at times. I was saying, well, that is an understatement of the century. But like, I was like, it's actually quite nice.
So just a simple comment like that.
It was actually really, I was like, oh.
Can give you some closure, I guess.
Yeah. I don't have to worry about my car being burnt or something. Or painted with swear words on it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. All right, let's talk about haikus.
Okay, yeah.
So what is a haiku? And what ignited your passion for haikus? And why might others share that passion for haikus?
Yeah, so I mean, a haiku, I think, and this is where now if my wife was listening to this, she'd be horrified at my definition of what a haiku is. So it's basically like a very short poem, although it doesn't need to rhyme, which is what I always thought poems needed to do. 3 lines, it's 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and then 5 syllables. That's right, isn't it? And where did my passion for haikus come from? I'd always quite so before haikus, I'd always quite liked sort of randomly trying to make things rhyme, or like making up little like songs about things. Yes, randomly taking the piss usually. And then when I started at Innovator, obviously the place that opens up a world of opportunity, making breakthrough happen. I do remember talking with James, who's a very inspirational colleague, and he spoke about, he had like a book of dreams, and I think it was him. I think it was him that was like forming them as haikus of his dreams within his book, I think. And I thought this was a great idea. So then there was something I just thought, I'll make that into a haiku now that you said. That's it. I thought, what are my interesting dreams? And I can't remember what I should have looked these up before. I can't remember exactly what the haiku was.
You can take a moment to think about it if you want.
I don't know if I won't be able to remember.
Yeah,
I can't remember. But it was about, when my son Patrick was first born, I went through a period of about 3 or 4 weeks of having these like mad night terror dreams where I would just think that he was in the bed with me and I'd lost him. So I would get up and I would like take the bedding off the bed, take the cushions off the sofa, take the pram apart to try and find him. Like all in that sort of state of semi-consciousness. And then wake up a little bit more and think, actually, no, he's just in the bedroom with my wife, he's fine. And that happened quite a few times. So when James had said about that and his interest in dreams being haikus, I thought, you know what, I'll add one to the list. So I did that, and it was very funny. And it's that challenge, it's a communication challenge of getting across the salient points, in that case of a whole dream or story, into 17 syllables is a nice challenge.
It's an incredibly difficult creative challenge.
It is, yeah. At least to like get the point across and it still be engaging to read. Now, I'm not saying my haikus are engaging to read, but I do enjoy the process. I would put it in the category of, as well, if you're doing it at work, it's an excellent procrastination. Like 5 minutes of just like free thinking time to come up with something. And then there were a few others came up. I shared them with my wife. She was very scathing about them, which then made it more funny to do. But yeah, I actually think there's a lot of and you don't see it too much at work actually, but sometimes the more confident people are, the more they talk. Which maybe then you'll get to the end of this and go, geez, Gareth, you're very confident. This has gone on for a very long time. But there is something about stripping back a message to like its most basic function, which I think is a very useful tool. And I think actually consultants at Innovator are generally pretty good at it, but it's something you can always get better at, succinctly getting a message across. And I think a haiku embodies that.
Yep. And I think what's particularly difficult and impressive about it is, like you say, you're distilling information down into such a concise but specific way. But that has to depend on your ability to deduce the meaning behind the situation. Yeah, in a way, like you have to consolidate the meaning in a situation, and then you have to reformat that meaning. You have to reformat that meaning in a way which fits the structure. Yeah. And then it has to be entertaining. Like, there's so many different constraints on this medium. Yeah. It's just fascinating that you can do it. And you seem to do it quite fast as well. I would know that. Yeah. There's been situations where I'm like, how did he pull that out of his sleeve? Yeah. But that's part of the challenge. I guess the previous science work, you're always working within quite defined limitations and boundaries. And yeah, I really enjoyed the process of, I should do it more. Like, I generally only do it at work, but sometimes I think it would be cool to just try and do this at home, well, with the things that my son's doing. Because yeah, it is that thing. You've got to distill the meaning out of, like, what is the point you want to get across? And then you've got to fit it into a very defined structure. And you've also got to think of words that will fit the structure. So it's not just writing a poem or like writing a journal. It is, that would be an interesting thing, to keep a journal, like a haiku journal. Wow. That would be very interesting. Imagine if you got so good at it that you started to think in haiku. You're in the final meeting with a client, and the next steps is a haiku. I wonder if they'd notice. Yeah, that would be. Yeah, so I like it, and I think as well it was that thing coming to Innovator. There's like a very different place to work. I just think, God, that's really cool. I never would have thought to keep a book about my dreams and write them in haiku. Wow. What an inspirational person this is. And no, actually, I can also participate in that. So whilst it's amazing, actually, it's not like it's a really high barrier to entry. So yeah. But I think there's a lot to be said for distilling the meaning of something and getting it across succinctly. Often has more impact. What do you find yourself sort of gravitating towards when you're writing a haiku? I guess what sparks that initial, what compels you to distill the meaning in a situation? Is it it a feeling? Is it a feeling of like, this is something unique or funny? So I remember I wrote one about you leaving, because that was it was an important unique event, and I know you appreciate them as well. So I remember we'd spoken about, there was a lunchtime, which is what made us speak about this in the first place, and you were interested in poetry, and you said about which poems, does anyone know any poems off the top of their head? And I thought, well, actually, having read so many nursery rhymes, I do know some poems off the top of my head now. I think the one that I shared was the jellyfish one. Do you remember the jellyfish one? Yeah, that was it. Yeah. I'll try and recount it. I wish I were a jellyfish that cannot fall downstairs. Of all the things I wish to wish, I wish I were a jellyfish that hasn't any cares and doesn't even have to wish. I wish I were a jellyfish that cannot fall downstairs. Yeah. I just love the absurdity of it. Yeah. And there are I think that's a good thing about children's poetry, is there are quite a lot of real nonsensical ones. So like The Owl and the Pussycat is very nonsensical, it makes no sense. The Jumblies is quite a long poem. That's the one that you've almost memorised, I've memorised the whole thing now from start to finish because Patrick likes it. So maybe we can do a special episode where you come and just like a poet laureate or something. Just read out Edward Lear's. I think it was Edward Lear did that one. Maybe not. Can't remember. But yeah, like some of them are just mad. Like, which is kind of that. I think is a nice thing about having a child. You can go over these things again that you might not necessarily read as an adult. Thinking about the unique or the important moments to capture, I guess that kind of fits in one of the core components of meaning, which is significance. What kind of things do you find most significant typically in your life at this stage? Yeah, at this stage. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's at this stage. So it changes from start to what will eventually be the finish. That was big. I think, so at the moment, like things that are significant to me, or where do I see significance? I think having a child, I mean, I had cats before, I still have cats, very significant things, but
yeah, I now see like real significance in that being a father. It comes back to a little bit about what we said earlier about being a role model, but it's like really evident with having a child. So I think the strange thing is that Patrick, my son, is 18 months old, be almost 19 months old soon. And he will copy almost everything that you do. And it places like extra emphasis on like actually the actions that I'm having, even if I think they're trivial, do have a significance because they're being picked up and they're molding someone else and to what they're doing. So I don't know, a couple of illustrative examples. Christmas time, prepping the hallway because we're going to paint it. So wiping the walls down with the sugar soap with like a cloth. And then I turn to my right and he's got another cloth and he's just copying. He's just rubbing the wall as well. And like, that's interesting. Wow. And he's 15 months old at the time. You think, I haven't told you to do that. You've just started doing it. You emptied the dishwasher. He wants to like copy and grab the plates. And now actually we'll stand, my wife will be by the cupboard. I'll be at the dishwasher, give him a plate and he'll just shuttle between carrying the stuff because he wants to help. That's I think the wonderful thing about sort of toddlers of that age is the complete naivety to the world. So I think I see, that's probably where I see most significance now, which is making me reflect more on how I behave and what I do and how I am, because it's going to, whether I like it or not, it's going to have a big effect on how he is. And it goes beyond how I wipe the wall, but it's almost like, how is your mood? Because, we can all pick up on mood. And I'm sure he's highly attuned to doing that as well. So
yeah, kids are generally quite sensitive to these kind of things as well.
Yeah, they are in ways that, really makes you stop and think. So it's trying to be like, not get too annoyed about things, and likewise not go over the top and be like super happy about stuff as well. Like try and be a bit more level. I think so. My wife's done a fantastic job of like getting him to eat food, and he's just really well with that. But she's like, you got to be a little bit careful. Like, obviously, you don't like punish or tell off if he's decided not to eat something because he'll only get a reaction. But likewise, you praise, but don't go too over the top, because if you're over praising again, you learn that you're getting a reaction for doing things associated with, that act of eating. You want it to just be a thing that he does rather than a thing that he does to seek out like lots of praise, for example. I think that's the logic behind that. But yeah, so I think I see significance in terms of like that role now as a father, which before I wouldn't I just didn't have really. It's kind of strange. You think like you'd have to rejig around stuff, but I think it's, like you think I've only got a set proportion of significance to give out, and now part of the pie has taken up what has gone. But actually, I don't think anything has. I think it's just added on top.
So your prioritization structure is now pretty heavily weighted.
Very heavily weighted, which is fair. And I mean, that said, he's not around at the moment. Is that they're in Ireland seeing family, which is very nice for them. And so, like, I obviously missed him. You missed him a lot because he's a big priority. And actually that sort of resettling into, okay, well, now what is my priority because he's not here is kind of interesting as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What becomes, do you almost like revert back to old priorities or?
Well, there's been a little reversion to, I don't need to do quite as many things now because he's not here. So I'll be a little bit lazy. But then the other thing is actually getting all the things. So what's ended up happening is getting the things done that would have been more difficult to do if he was around. So like last weekend, this is the great content for your podcast, I painted the decking, for example, which had been very difficult with him there. I connected up a new water
Well,
butt.
it could have been difficult, or it could have been twice as fast, right? If you got a little...
well, if I'd rolled him in the paint...
If you got a little copycat.
Yeah, true. Yeah, just got him like put his knees in it and then let him crawl around on the decking. He could have like wiped the paint across. But yeah, so sort of those things. I mean, even like coming here today, this would be more difficult if he was around. So actually,
one day we might have him on.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
We'll need another mic, a little one.
Yeah, a little one, and you'll get one syllable words like cow, cat. I know he can do some too. So one of his favourite things at the moment is to point at his willy and say dilly, which is, I think, what all boys would do about that age. But I guess actually, so I'm talking about it now, but then when I think and zoom out, my priority and significance is still him. He's just not here. I'm just doing the things that will make life easier when he is here. So actually, that is still the focus. But yeah, I reckon probably in that the question being, where do you find significance? I reckon that probably is at the moment the biggest place.
And then taking a broader view, I guess the big question of what aspects of your life do you find most meaningful? So significance being one of the components, but the other ones being coherence and flow and purpose. Do you find yourself consciously thinking about these other things as well? Or is it I guess what's been your approach to cultivating meaning in your life? Yeah,
so probably not thought about it in the direct way that we're thinking about it now. I think sort of like now I do feel very much like the purpose is like be a good dad, like it sounds old fashioned, but sort of provide. So, work hard, make the home environment nice and stable. So my wife's happy, so my son's happy. So there feels like there's a real purpose, which perhaps like until he'd arrived, you got some purpose, you got intrinsic motivation to, be comfortable and to try and do well. Not that I've had the level of motivation where I'd want to be like a super high flyer. I think it is quite noticeable at work that many people have, incredible hobbies that they are super good at. I don't really have that. Perhaps I don't have quite that same level of intrinsic motivation, but it's clear now that sort of the purpose-wise comes with Patrick. And then I think that going back, sort of the flow, so being present in the moment, I think is really important. I'm very mindful of how quickly my son is changing. Like they say, a day can like be a long time, but a week can go very quickly or something like that. And it is true. And changes happen on like a very quick basis. So becoming more aware that I want to enjoy like each moment as he's going through. And so trying very hard not to worry about when I'm with him and when we're like playing around or I'm reading a book, that's all I'm thinking about. You're not thinking about the other stuff, which is flow. And I think in my life, I primarily got that from like playing cricket or playing sport. And it's something that has actually been missing a bit certainly since COVID, because I stopped playing darts then as well, until we've got to like the now with Patrick. But it is that moment, like we said right at the beginning, when I think of being in that flow state and all you're thinking about is what you're doing, I think about being at Woodside Park in Benfleet, at the end where I'd always bowl from. Everyone knew that's where I was going to bowl from. The ball's thrown to me from mid-on or mid-off. You do a couple of practice balls and then it's thrown back again. And then all I'm thinking about in that moment is what I want to execute and how I'm going to, do it to the best of my ability. And everything else leaves your mind. There's not, another thing that goes, you're not thinking about anything else. There's I'd say very much my happy place. And I think anyone that does sport, with like any level of competitiveness or wanting to do well will have like experienced this too. And actually it's when external thoughts come in that you tend to misperform. And I think if I reflect on my cricketing career, but my batting could definitely have been better at times because sometimes my mind could wander when I was doing that. But the days when I got lots of runs and did well, just everything felt so natural. You felt like you had more time. You're not thinking about anything else. You just keep hitting the ball sweetly. It doesn't matter what the bowler does. And you get that sort of inner warmth of, it's my day today and I'm going to cash in and it doesn't matter what you do. I'm going to smash you everywhere. And eventually you get out because you make a mistake. But that's why I'm not professional.
But yeah. I'm curious whether, that almost that building of the muscle through cricket of, entering that flow state quite swiftly in some cases because you sort of need to perform in the moment. Whether exercising that muscle in one scenario carries on into, say, the context where you are playing with your son and, do you find yourself almost slipping into that state naturally? Or
So I think, interestingly, when we have done cricket-related things, so there was a time last year I was preparing to... I lost, I think it can happen to anyone. And I think, as I said, I was not necessarily the most naturally talented. Like my cohort of friends that I grew up playing with as a junior, a lot of them were more talented than me. But I think I made a good fist of like the talent that I had, which was still like better than a lot of people, but certainly wasn't as good as some of my friends. To cut a very long story short, you stop playing for a while, and then when you try and, the body gets a bit older and less flexible, and there's all those little niggly injuries that are there all of the time. And there's been a couple of times where I've then tried to do what I used to do and not do it to the same standard, and it really annoyed me. And it actually put me off wanting to play in general. I knew last summer I was going to have to play in a game that a lot of people would be at. So it was my club's at home 75th anniversary. They have a President's Day where the president of the club puts together a team to play the club first team. The president asked me to be the captain of the team. So I felt quite a lot of responsibility that I need to perform, or at least not make an arse of myself, was the mindset. So I spent a couple of months beforehand in the garden, worked out, because my garden's not very long, where I needed the ball to bounce on the wall to make it a good length. And I'd, have Patrick there as well, and I'd be bowling, and then throwing a ball around and playing with him. And that sort of moment, it was almost like the same thing. It's like, actually, that's now all I'm thinking about again. Or if we're kicking a ball between each other. So I think those sort of physical games where you're thinking about your coordination and executing something, and it might be like kicking the ball with just the right weight so it lands at his feet or something. Like then, you are flicking into that state. And I think from the sporting perspective, you tend to find, again, I found like some of the people I play cricket with, they're just really good at like lots of sports. And they're really good at things that aren't adjacent skill-wise. So someone that's good at cricket might also be good at football. It's not that surprising. But you go and you play pool with them and they're really good. Or you play darts with them and they're really good. And I think those things carry over because in each of those activities, it's the ability to sort of concentrate within the moment on the skill that you're executing to the exclusion of all other noise. Which I think is where the other things it would cross over. Does it cross over into life? I don't know. Maybe that's something I've struggled with since stopped playing cricket so much, is actually finding those moments when I am just in the moment and not worrying about or thinking about like X, Y, Z decision. I think part of the science background and the consultancy as well, where the job is to go in and, basically research an area very quickly and come to a conclusion. I think I've found it more difficult since I stopped playing cricket to be able to like drop those thoughts out of my head. So I don't know, like recently we bought a new car because the car died. I spent like a disproportionate amount of time worrying about all of the, I looked at every bloody model of car with every review of everything to try and make the best possible decision, like a good Innovian would, I think. But where before I would have had that moment where I'd have gone off and played cricket and forgot about it, I think sort of lost that to an extent. So it's something I'm actually like actively trying to work on at the moment, is to spend more time in the flow. Because you do have that feeling afterwards. I think, where would I find it? Maybe if I'm going I like looking at birds. So if I've got the binoculars out and you're having a look, seeing what the bird's doing. Actually, that's all you're thinking about when you're doing that. And it's really nice. You get that warm, fuzzy feeling afterwards. It's like, yeah, that was good.
So you should get little Patrick a set of mini binoculars.
He will be getting a set of mini binoculars. But again, that's the mad thing about you shaping the child is especially when he was very young, you could put him in the carrier and we'd go for a walk outside because I think it was good for him to be outside. And it's worked because he loves being outside now, which is good. Although I think most children would. But like we'd be looking at the birds and now like he'll see a bird go overhead and he'll stop and he'll watch and he'll go like tweet, tweet, because that's the bird like sound, or just like watch with big open eyes them flying above, and you think, well, wow, you're probably doing that because you see mummy and daddy looking up and looking at this stuff.
That's interesting. So you're almost, not only are you teaching them the core characteristics of being a good person, but also actually appreciating the beauty in life. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So obviously we mentioned how cricket can help you enter that flow state, but I'm sure there's a lot of other things that there's a lot of other ways that sport can create value in your life.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear some of the ways that you find cricket has influenced your personal character and I guess shaped your worldview in a way.
Yeah. Okay. So good question. I think that the cricket I played and growing up at the cricket club that I did was probably the single biggest thing that shaped who I am today, which is, he reflects at 35. There's a long time to go yet. But the context is my dad played a lot of cricket. He played so much cricket and was so committed to sport in various guises that my sister's birth was delayed 3 days because he wanted to watch Southend play football. True story, which is mad. It was an elective caesarean. It could have been done Friday. My dad pushed for it to be done on the Monday so he could watch Southend draw 1-1 to Birmingham in 1992 in January.
It was a draw.
It was a draw as well. But he was a very keen cricketer. He was a pretty good club cricketer. Again, I would say, I don't think you mind me saying this, that he wouldn't have been like massively naturally talented, but he tried very, very hard. He was very competitive, very committed. So I grew up like he would be away every, Saturday and Sunday. He would be playing cricket during the summer. And as soon as we would go and watch sometimes. So all of my earliest memories really as a child playing around are at the park where the cricket club is, and playing with the children of the sort of other players, which actually cricket wise is often how you get into it, is because your parents play. And it's, if I think back to being like, 5 to 10 or 5 to 15 years old, all I wanted to do was play cricket all the time. It's all I thought about doing. And I was lucky. I played, I did okay. I played a little bit of county cricket as a junior. I played district cricket, like the level below, and did well at that. And at the time, although it wouldn't be possible now, ended up playing a lot of adult cricket. So cricket's obviously a non-contact sport. So whereas rugby or football, you really can't have a big discrepancy in age. It doesn't work until you're big enough. You kind of can in cricket. So I think at the time, clubs have politics. The club had a big problem where some people left, and it meant the lower side. So I think they were running 4 sides on a Saturday. We were often short of a player or two. So from the age of 8 was when I started filling in. And then what did that look like in practice? Well, you get dropped off at the club at 12:30 in the car park, get in the back of someone's car, and I just don't think this could happen anymore because there were no checks being done on who was driving you around. There was just someone at the club. You go there in the back of their car. You share the changing room with them. You're all in one small room. I mean, it's a lot smaller than this. They're all getting naked and going in the shower. Obviously, as an 8-year-old, you're not getting naked. You've come in your whites and you're just sat there. But like that, when I think, like, how did I spend my weekends in the summer from the age of 8 until I moved to Cambridge at the age of whatever it was? I'd have been playing cricket and I'd have been at the cricket club and I'd have been around those people. And I think the great thing about any sports club like that, and cricket in particular, cricket matches are very long. You spend a lot of time with these people. So you learn, although you don't know you're consciously doing it, you learn how to get on with different people, because it isn't I know at the professional level, it's often people that have gone to private schools that are playing, and that's because they're getting more opportunity to play, really. But at like that level, it wasn't like that at all. It's a real mix across society. So from some people that were university educated down to, people that were just labourers, and everything in between. So very different personalities, the kind that I wouldn't have seen at school, for what we were saying earlier, where everything is very streamed in your social circles at school and at university. You're around very like-minded individuals. Obviously, you all have something in common, at your sports club, whatever the sport may be, it's the sport, but everything else could be completely different. So I think growing up playing in that adult environment, which by the age of 10, I would have been doing every Saturday and most Sundays. So I think the usual pattern would be a junior match in the morning on a Saturday and Sunday, and then an adult game in the afternoon. And so you learn how to get on with like different people. You get slapped down. You can't be arrogant because, being an arrogant 10-year-old in a change room of adults, you're just going to be told to fuck off. That's just how it's going to be. So I think and it gets you that practice, which I think has been very useful as I've got older and was useful in teaching, is you learn how to speak to different people. So I think the nicest thing anyone ever said to me at the cricket, well, one of the nicest things, I'm blowing my own trumpet. It was a couple of years older. We played some junior cricket together, a lot of adult cricket. He said to me one winter session, he was like, do you know the good thing about you, Gareth, is you're really clever, but you wouldn't know it. when you first see you, it just won't come across. And he's like, that's great. I was like, oh, thanks. Ouch was Alan Jr., so we called him Ouch. That's very nice of you to say. And
that's a beautiful thing to say.
Yeah, and but I think that was just the case of growing up in and being in that environment. And it's where, I didn't really socialise with people that I went to school with outside of school because I was always playing cricket. And I think if a lot of ex-professional people that leave sport talk about how much they miss the dressing room and that environment, because it does feel like you're on the same team for a long time. I'd almost to the point of, if it had win us the game, I'd have stuck my head in front of the ball to stop it from going for a boundary or something, because you want to do the best for your teammates. So
it fills you with a sense of purpose, I guess.
100%, yeah. Real sense of purpose. I thought for a long time, I'm always going to live in the same area, and my aim is I want to take more wickets than my dad has taken, because he's taken the most wickets for the club, and it might take me till I get to 60, but I should be able to keep playing to 60 if I stay fit and healthy and I don't smoke, which he smoked a lot, which ended up making him stop. Maybe I'll be able to get to 2000 and whatever it is he got, 2050, I think. And each year was doing the calculation in my head of how many wickets do I need to take and how long is it going to take to do that. And I felt like that was my purpose. Yeah.
That's a brilliant goal. Very specific.
It's incredibly specific. And I think my wife would say...
there's like an element of legacy as well that you're leaving.
Yeah, and I think that I do think about that quite a lot, actually. What would be the legacy? Just in general in lots of things. But for cricket, I just felt I'm always going to play here. Just sort of learn, what do I do on the Saturday and Sunday in the summer? I play cricket. You don't drop out. Like you say you're going to play, you turn up on time. You do all the other bits that you have to do. You go training, you train properly and you train hard to be the best that you can be. And it's just interesting, how life had changed a bit moving up here. It then became a lot more difficult I travelled back for 1 year to play every Saturday, but the lack of training made that more difficult to perform at the level I wanted to perform at and not feel like I was letting people down. So then I started playing up here and then actually realised, is it the cricket I liked or is it the environment and the people I liked and the history of being around there? And actually it's the latter I think was more important. So I played in Cottenham, which is where I was living for, I don't know, probably 3-4 seasons I did until COVID hit. But it just wasn't the same. It wasn't my club. And in the end, got to that point of I'm not doing as well as I want to do. You start thinking, I kind of wish it had rained today so I don't have to go. And at that point, COVID came. You thought, wow, okay, this is a very good excuse not to play. And I haven't really played properly since. There's been a few times where I've got the bug because the wonders of the modern age, my home team, a lot of their games now are streamed on the internet, so you can just sit and watch.
Even at that level?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and it's not a terrible level. So if you...
But a club team, right?
Club team. So club team, no one's being paid. Well, there might be an overseas player being paid, but otherwise they're not being paid. But I guess cricket's very different to football in that you have to go a long way down the pyramid of football before it's not at a national level and it's not professional. Whereas professional cricket, you've got obviously the England side, top tier. Below that, you have the county championship in the UK. So certain counties of England and Wales have their a professional side. Some don't. So Cambridgeshire, for example, doesn't have a professional side, but Essex does. So in Essex, the system would be you have the county team, then you've got the second 11, and then you've got Premier Division club cricket, Division 1, 2, 3, and our first team at home would be between Divisions 2 and 3. So you're a couple of levels below what would be professional. You are paying, some clubs are paying people, so you are playing against people that have either recently have played professionally. I mean, at times last year they were playing against people that played internationally. They're just earning a nice wedge on a Saturday for rocking up for playing. So it was a reasonable standard, but I mean, I was never going to get anywhere near being a professional.
But that's a pretty good crucible for I guess mastering the skill in a way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think the hard thing with cricket is you don't get many shock results because you can hold on in football and you can score the goal at the end. Like the times we've played against teams that are on paper significantly better, there ain't much you can do about it.
You just got to go with the flow.
You just got to go with the flow, which is getting battered. Like, there's a game I remember, I'll keep it brief. I remember we went over, it was an Easter Monday. No, it wasn't Easter Monday. It was like May Day Monday. There was a 2020 competition. So that wasn't in like divisions. You could play against the Prem team, and we got drawn against like the top Prem team in the county. You know, we rocked up at the ground. They were all in a coloured kit because it was a 2020 game. They had coloured sight screens. There were coloured stumps. They were practising. They had a match day programme. I'd scrambled together this side to go and play because people didn't really want to play because they knew we were going to get battered. I went to pick up one guy. He was about 14, 15 at the time. He's now a professional footballer playing for Leyton Orient. If he listens, he'd know who he is. He'd been out on the piss the night before, so I picked him up. He had a can of Red Stripe still in his hand. I was like, oh, God. We rock up with, I think I did get 11 players together. 2 weren't registered to the club, so I had to tell them what their name was in case the umpire asked, so we weren't done for fielding ineligible players. I was interviewed over a tannoy system at the beginning of the game. I was like, what's your chances? I'm not sure. You know, the opening bowler for them, I'd watched open the bowling for Essex on the TV the night before.
Talk about foreshadowing.
This is going to be carnage, and we got absolutely battered.
I mean, how do you rally the troops in that situation?
So I said when we were in the change room, like, you've got to be, I guess you lose integrity if you just lie. So I can't remember exactly what I said, but it would have been something along the lines of like, look, it's not very often we get to come and play somewhere like this where this is like a premium pitch, premium conditions. There's, 100 odd people here watching. We might not get this opportunity again. So I know this is going to be pretty challenging. It's only 20 overs. So no matter how bad it gets, we just keep going and like have a bit of pride and, show them what we can do because we're good as well. And, if we execute our skills well, we might not win, but let's not make ourselves look like idiots, basically.
What an amazing thing to say.
Well, yeah. Let's not be idiots. And we did get absolutely battered. I think for the cricketers listening, I think they scored about 250. It was a very small ground, which didn't help. So our ground's very big back at home, and this ground was very, very small. So they got maybe 260 in 20 overs, which is a lot. And I didn't think we actually bowled badly. They were just really good. Their batting was really good. For the first and only time I got asked what roller I wanted at the interval, did I want the heavy or light roller from the groundsman that was on site to roll the wicket? I was like, that's very nice. The light roller, please. And actually, in reply, we did okay. I think we got about 160, 170 runs. We weren't bowled out.
But credit to you for, even because you could have got battered and it would have probably had a much different effect on the team if it wasn't for what you'd said in that situation. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's definitely times that I played where I was captain and we did get battered. And you come off and you're like, actually, that was really bad. And it was embarrassing. And that actually wasn't embarrassing. I think sometimes you've just got to hold your hands up and say, there's a reason why 5 or 6 of you are playing professionally or have played professionally, and we're not. So they were very respectful. I played games against other teams where I think there was one cup match. This is just reminiscent now. There's one cup match where we got quite a long way through a cup competition kind of by accident and then got drawn against the team that were paying loads of money to people, and they were very arrogant and they were disrespectful and it wasn't a nice experience. They were just telling us we were shit the whole time, sort of on their phones when they were fielding. But you go out to bat and there's some guy that's just, played in India for New Zealand A, like running at you bowling. You're like, well, it's just not really what I signed up for.
This isn't fun anymore.
This isn't fun. The worst bit is you go out to bat and you turn around to see where the wicket keeper is and they're a long way behind you and they just wave at you. It's like, because then the ball's going to have to go very quickly to get through to that position. But I think what's the value of cricket in that respect? It's all of those things, and as well, it's you've got to train, you've got to work hard. You learn to win and you learn to lose. And I hate losing. I hated losing with cricket, but I think there is something about, and it's the same with all sports, that you commit to. When you're part of a team, you really try and you do your best for the team. And I think when it's going well, you take as much pleasure out of the team doing well as you do out of yourself doing well. You just want to do your bit. And I've tried to keep that in all. I think everywhere I've worked, I'd like to think that's how people would have seen me. That I'm not in it for myself, really. I don't mind taking a back seat, not to be lazy, but, to like let someone else have credit, or to, do the key thing if it means that the end output is, better for everyone.
All important qualities of a great leader.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you, I guess, on behalf of all the cricket team that I have not met and probably will never meet, because I don't enjoy cricket.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. And there are times when I don't enjoy watching it. I don't know what their views would be. But yeah, I think the key to my thing about being a leader, not that I'm a leader of anything now, really, is you just should never ask someone to do something you're not prepared to do yourself. So I think when I was captain, I'd make the point of doing. There would be times when I would be the one with the little flag scooping the dog shit up off the pitch myself, rather than telling someone else to do it. Because you think, well, if you can't do it yourself, you can't expect other people to muck in. And I think that's a pretty good like moniker to live by, really.
Here.
The problem I have living here to play for the club, where it means a lot to me, is it's about an hour and 20-minute drive. So if your game starts at 12 o'clock and you need to be there an hour before the game starts, and you need to drive an hour and a half to make sure you get there, and then the game finishes at 8 o'clock in the evening, it's a lot of the day gone.
Yes.
When your wife is at home with the 19-month-old baby all day.
You almost just want to be teleported there and...
Exactly.
Bowl your...
But do my bit. Ideally, like, better than I did for Cottenham, which is the other thing I just still like working out in my head, is how if I can't practice twice a week and be as good as I can be, how do I still find joy and pleasure in doing it, in not being as good as you think you should be? And that's something I'm still working on. So, yeah.
Okay, so reflecting on the different stages of your career.
Yeah.
From teaching to being a PhD researcher and now being a consultant at Innovator.
Yeah.
What would you say are the key characteristics or the transferable qualities that have allowed you to make the most of those different situations? Like, one of the things that I think about quite often one of the things that stood out to me at Innovator was your ability to adapt your communication style, which is incredibly important in a client situation. I think that sort of ties into, those experiences of having to do the same for kids of various levels. Which is not to say that clients are kids, but it's to say that there's a diverse audience sometimes that you have to cater for.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if there's characteristics like that which you can put a finger on and say, actually, these things help me be the best researcher and then be the best consultant that I can be.
Yeah, okay. So all of those things, people are like, so teacher, obviously people are important. You've got the students, you've got your colleagues, you've got the parents. PhD life, I mean, you are more solo, but you still actually, in a different sort of way, you're fundamentally reliant on a personal relationship with whoever your supervisor or boss is. And you talk to any PhD student, their experience will be largely shaped by who that person was. And also the people around you, because there's a finite amount of equipment and resources you need to share. And personality types can be quite extreme in a laboratory setting, or at least stress can be very high. So I think understanding people, although again, I wouldn't say I'm an expert at all, but being able to talk to different people and build rapport, I think is important in a lab setting. And certainly for consulting, it's more of a people game than I thought. Because I think, like you said, adjusting how you speak to clients is really important. To your colleagues, I mean, we know in Innovator with the sort of holistic working patterns, you've got people from very different disciplines. Like I would never, I think, until I'd been at Innovator, ever have spoken to a designer before, for example. But actually, particularly at Innovator, you're trying to solve difficult problems, and it means you need to be comfortable coming up with a lot of wrong ideas to try and get the right idea. You're only going to be doing that if you're comfortable along with the people you're with. So I think there is reading the people you're with, can you have a joke? Can you not have a joke? How far can you push it? Because some people will find things funny, some won't. Some will want things to be very straight-laced, some won't. So try and work that out quickly. And then with clients, I mean, they're fallible people as well. So the thing that surprised me through the further I get through life is I keep thinking I'm going to come up to the people that are perfect to know everything. And it continuously baffles me that there are people in very high places Many of them are amazing, but they're not perfect, and they have their they have their fallibilities, and some of them are very imperfect. And you really are like, well, how on earth are you in that position? Because I always think my default position, would be to think, well, they probably know more about this than me, or they're better than me. So sort of relax. I found it hard at the university with that, because there's also a lot of people have that inherent confidence where they will talk really confidently about something, and you'll think, well, fair enough, I'm wrong, you're right.
Which is tricky, right?
It is really tricky.
It can be it can mask an inherent inconfidence, or it can mask the underlying lack of confidence because they've made up for it with a high level of articulation.
Yeah, and it really, I found that very... You got the, what am I doing here? Imposter syndrome's the term I'm looking for. Definitely to begin with at the university, thinking at some point you're going to work out I'm a fraud and I shouldn't be here because you're all so amazing. And I think you keep having those things as I go through. So what's been a key transferable skill throughout is the ability to, I think I'm pretty good at, is reading people and working out, what you shouldn't say, and how you building some rapport and trust. Because when you're dealing with people, trust is the key. Is really key to functioning well. So I think that is a thing that's important. Obviously, communicating and presenting information, a base skill in teaching, you have to be able to do that. That's your job. The PhD and postdoc research actually is very important, although it's a different audience that you're talking to. It still ends up being, for the vast majority of PhDs and postdocs, the project they're doing, they know more about it than everyone. It's very hard, no matter how good the group leader is, to be really into the weeds of what they're doing if they've got 10 other people in the lab. So every time you come to present what you've done, you still need to break it down in a way that suits your audience. Now, that is very different to how you present it to people at Innovator or Year 7s, but it's actually still the same process. And now at Innovator, it's the same. You might have to flex. You are going to present information to a client that actually technically they're very on it. They know their details. So you need to satisfy their criteria. But you also need to, in team meetings, break it down for people that are not biologists so that they understand, so they can contribute. So I think the communication and explaining and breaking down is, again, it all goes back to teaching, really. And then I think other sort of transferable skills that have helped throughout. The talk about time management is probably not one of my strengths. I can work to a deadline and get stuff done, but I'd always be one of those people that probably leaves it a little bit, cuts it fine. I work best when... there's no option, but you've got to do this now or it's not going to get done. That's when my best work happens. I think, or at least I'm 100%. I think of it as all the cores of my brain are on and they're going at 100%. But I think a lot of teachers say, my time management's excellent. And I guess the other thing, although it's not been too much of a problem at Innovator, and does make me anxious at the thought of it, is when you have to have those difficult conversations with people. It wasn't such an issue in the lab. But certainly teaching, there's times when you had to have, difficult conversations with students or parents.
Where you know that their reaction isn't going to be...
Yeah.
Or at least you're not going to be saying stuff that they want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. You're telling them things they really don't want to hear, but they need to know. And I can see that is going to be the case in times at Innovator as well. And even I guess the big change there is the talking about money. Which is just not a conversation in academia or education. There's no money in education.
How convenient.
Yeah, and academia, really, you're always on a pretty linear trajectory. It's quite hard to, unless you're really exceptional, which I wasn't, to sort of jump levels. Whereas, the private sector, you're talking to a client, you're negotiating money. And you might do a project. There's going to be times when you're telling them stuff they don't want to hear because they've paid a lot of money for something and they're not getting the outcome that they want. But I think that previous practice in that will be helpful. Yeah, I'd say they're probably the key skills. It all comes down to people. I think the vast majority of life and work is getting along with people. So
that definitely seems like a common thread or a through line in a lot of these different experiences that you've had is, a conditioning to be sensitive to people and what they need, what they, or perhaps thinking what they're frustrated with, all these different things.
Exactly. Can you see it from their point of view? I think that's always the thing. Can you put yourself in someone else's position and no matter what you think about it and however right you might be, but why are they thinking what they're thinking? And I think that's something I feel like I'm quite good at.
And I think it would be, I think we'd live in a better world if everyone cultivated that skill.
We would.
Just broadening their perspective on reality, really.
Yeah.
Because like we were saying before, some people are living in quite a narrow slither. So
yeah, and we often only hear certain stories. So there's a famous cyclist called Peter Sagan who's now pretty much finished. Is on the mountain bikes now. But I remember reading his book. That he wouldn't have written. Someone else would have written it for him. But he thought of there's a cycle race. There's 200 riders in the peloton. That's 200 different stories that you could ask any of them, and they'd have an equally valid story that was had its bits of jeopardy in or whatever. You only hear one story at the end. It's the one of the winner. So. And I think it's a very good analogy for actually like the world we live in, really. You only hear certain voices. I think in the age of social media and the liking of the algorithms, that you only hear the stories that are going to reinforce what you already think, which is even worse.
One question I forgot to ask.
Yeah,
I guess it's more of like a taking a step back. But
yeah,
when we talk about the transition between those different careers. It's not to say that they're miles apart, but there must have been a lot of different considerations. And I'd love to, I'd love to understand where your head was at in the lead up to those transitions, and then I guess in the cooling off period.
Yeah, good. So, yeah, in a way, it does link back to the theme of the podcast around like meaning and what's important to you at the time. So, I explained that like why I went into teaching in the first place. There were strong emotional reasons for getting fed up with teaching. I mean, the first school I was in was great for the first year. Then a new head teacher came in that I found challenging. I think they lacked empathy on any level for humans, or at least adult teachers at the school. And I found it became more and more difficult place to work for reasons I won't go into. I don't want to be libelous. So I moved schools thinking that I'm going to the outstanding school. This will be fantastic. I know people that are like working here, effectively headhunted to go there. It's going to be great. And then get there and realise actually the message is the same. It's just delivered in a much better way than it was delivered in the previous place. And it got to that Christmas. I just felt quite stressed. I was working very hard and thought I can't see me doing this for the next 40 years. But if I keep doing it for much longer, you'll be earning too much money and it'd be very hard to switch. Because it is hard. Like the more money you earn, the harder it is to let it go. And for reasons I said about why I ended up doing teaching in the first place, I had put off the idea of ever doing a PhD or anything, but I saw it at the time as a route to sort of get out and do something different that in a way as well would be acceptable to the management at the school if I said, I'm actually going to go do this instead. And I didn't know what else to do. So I protest applied for some PhDs that Christmas. I thought nothing of it. I thought my mental thought process was, if I get I'll know what to do next year if I really want to do this. If I was to stay, I'm sure I would have ended up having some, I don't know if I've been a head of department, but something like that relatively quickly. Not that I wanted to be a head of department. That was an absolutely awful job that I don't think, my hats go out to every head of department listening. I think you're just beaten with a stick. You should not be held accountable for how every child does in your subject because you're not teaching them. So protest applied, thought nothing of it, had a few interviews, one of which was up here in Cambridge. Professor Alex Webb offered me the job, which I wasn't expecting, and I thought this was a chance of a lifetime. I can't turn down a fully funded PhD at the University of Cambridge. But so I think that transition, at the time I was looking for, it was an emotional decision to apply for the PhDs. If I had been offered one of the other two that I'd applied for, I don't know that I would have taken it. It's hard to know like what you would do when you retrospectively look back. And how did I feel about that afterwards? I was pretty nervous because it was a big change. It kind of felt, so I sort of got through the rest of the year at the school. I think that summer my dad was unwell. I ended up helping like run the family shop for about 6 weeks, I think, just before. So it kind of felt like, in a way, if you're looking for like a greater meaning in everything in the university, well, this actually works out really well because my parents would have been really stuffed if I had to go back to work in September. So that whole September I spent, because the term starts in October in Cambridge, I spent working in the shop. And so I kind of thought, okay, that's good. I was very nervous about moving here. I'd never really lived away from home. Even when I was an undergrad, I went back at weekends to play cricket or see my girlfriend of the time. I was very intimidated. Yeah, it was a lot of nerves, but like the rationale behind the decision, yeah, it was quite emotive. Don't know if I'd make the same decision now. I don't know. And it does make you wonder, what would I be doing now? I mean, when I asked my wife about it, she says, God, I'd have left you because you were so unhappy. I just couldn't, it just wouldn't have worked. So she thought it was a good idea. So yeah, that was sort of the rationale and the thinking behind coming up here.
But I mean, I guess one of the lessons there is you were clearly in touch with how you were feeling at that point. If it's messing with your energy,
yeah,
and if you're someone who's a naturally positive, and it's not really an option in a way.
No, and I think that's where I found it hard. And sometimes I wonder, is this just me looking back retrospectively and wanting to put some rose-tinted glasses on certain decisions you've made? And I think that's where it's really hard to look back on the past, because what is the past? Like, it's just a construct in my head, really, how my neurons have remembered it. But I think the thing I found hard, as I got into it to begin with, and has kind of happened in each position I've been in, I wonder if it happened at NAİMİ, is to begin with, I found it quite hard as a teacher to have an opinion on anything. Like, I could hear two people say two polar opposite things in a staff meeting and think, well, you both kind of sound right, actually. I don't know if I had to pick one, which one I'd pick. And then as time goes on, you start to form your own opinions about things. And it just got to I think with teaching, it got to the stage where there were many decisions being made that I just didn't fundamentally agree were right, or morally the right thing to do. And it started to sit badly with me, and I didn't like that. And as well, I think once you've been somewhere a little while, you start to get a voice and you start to question and argue back. And that was the problem I had in the first school, is I did start arguing back a bit. And I was young and naive, like early 20s, thinking, wow, this is what you've got to do. But actually, you really got to play the game. The world of work is a world of politics, whether you're in politics or not. So I think I got that. That was definitely something I got wrong. But that's what was jarring on me, and I think making me unhappy, and drove me to that decision to apply for the PhDs. And then I think the transition and that was a big transition, going from full-time adult professional job to being a student in the lab, where, of course, I was the oldest PhD student. I was older than the PhD student that was 2 years ahead of me, who's an absolute genius. I was older than the postdoc in the lab, who's also a genius. So you're getting taught how to do things by people younger than you, which actually, in the end, I didn't mind. It didn't bother me, but I didn't know how I was going to find that, because actually everywhere else I'd always been the youngest. I'd always been the youngest around the cricket club. And actually it would be me telling older people what to do, not the other way round. In teaching, the whole time I was the youngest in the staff room. Like within the departments I was in, I don't think anyone was younger than me in the science department. It doesn't matter. And then you go, there's like the roles have been switched. Of course, the group leader's older than me. He's 30 years older than me, but everyone else is younger. It's a bit strange. So that was quite a big step. That was very different, and it was a very different work environment to be in. But I think teaching had set me up actually very well for it. And that's where we went from the big peaks and troughs teaching to it was a lot more. There were some bad days, but there was some good days. But actually, most of the time, it's all pretty homogenous. And then the move from sort of academia, so like PhD to postdoc, I wasn't planning on doing a postdoc. It was just circumstance, and it was convenient. Wasn't much more thought went into it than that. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then the opportunity arose to stay on in the lab and be paid a salary whilst I wrote on my PhD.
And it was just a natural progression.
It's just a natural progression. It was the most easy thing to do. I sometimes reflect on, I think at Innovator, if I'd come here 3 years before, where would I be in Innovator now? How much money would I be earning? It would be more than I'm earning now. That you have that sort of thought process, but then the thing I have to stop and think is, if I hadn't done the postdoc, I never would have applied to work at Innovator. I wouldn't have had the confidence to like even apply for the job thinking I'd be able to do it. There's like zero chance I would have applied. So I think, in that sense, it was a good thing. But I knew during the postdoc, I wasn't going to become an academic. I'm not fundamentally not good enough at the science. and not committed enough in that I didn't love it enough. I think those people that make it in the academic world have two things. They have luck, the right place, right time, right project, right paper, publication. And the other thing they have is like a real love for what they're doing. You got to go above and beyond. And could I have been in the right place at the right time? Don't know, toss the coin. But I was not didn't have the passion for it. So yeah, then what's the criteria then? So I wasn't leaving the job because I hated it or I was stressed. I wasn't. It was very comfortable. I liked my boss. I liked the environment, but it just wasn't what I was going to do long term. But then it comes back to that meaning thing of what's important to you. And then suddenly it's a complete different set of... So you've got to make the best decision you can in the moment, which I still have to tell myself about things like buying the car. But there I was thinking, okay, my wife has a good job at a local secondary school. We have a baby and we have a mortgage. So I need to pay the mortgage, and I need to be around to help with the baby. So let's think about what jobs we can do. Because I don't know what I want to do. I was never that person that grew up, that was growing up and says, I am going to be in the army or I'm going to be a police officer. That wasn't me. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But actually break it down into a very objective exercise of ideally I'll be X number of within the X radius of the house. And I know what the mortgage is. I know how much I need to earn. These are the things I think I'm okay at. Like, where were those skills fit in? And it was go back to my teaching mentor who I saw last week. He said, well, why don't you think about consultancy? Actually, you'd be surprised at how your skills will cross over well into that. So do the consultancy careers event at the university. Got talking to Fraser Alcock of Innovator, who seemed like a thoroughly nice guy. He was very relaxed compared to the other consultants speaking at the event, who all looked like they hated themselves to a greater or lesser degree.
It's a testament to Innovator
for sending him along, I think. Yeah. And so I thought, well, actually, he seems nice. So I applied for the job along with a couple of others, where then I did have to make a decision. And there have been times since where I've thought quite carefully about whether it was the right decision or not. So I sort of, applied for a few jobs like you do. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. So one was Innovator, one was a consultancy, a mid-sized... Well, a small boutique consultancy that did mid-sized pharmaceutical business stuff. But I thought it sounded interesting. I was interested in pharmaceutical industry from my time on placement as an undergrad. Or there was the opportunity to have a teaching lecturer position at Anglia Ruskin University, where a previous genius postdoc from the lab was working. And I was pretty confident that I'd get that job if I applied. You don't know until you apply. You don't know who you're going to be up against. But I'd met the head of the school. We'd had a nice coffee chat. He told me what I'd be able to do, told me all the plans for like the plant science and how great it'd be. I think they wanted me to go there. And so I had a decision to make is, do I do something where I kind of know what the score is? Because it's teaching. It'll be like college teaching, but to undergrads.
And I've heard you talk about, same thoughts, different contexts.
Yeah. So do I do what I know, that I think I know I can do for sure? But do I want to do that, or do I? But as well, like if you think, so Innovator has the fun, fulfillment, finance, 3 Fs. The finance side of that is going to be very capped because there'll be another same linear trajectory essentially as the university. It's going to be the same pay scale. And education has its problems. I've lived them. Or do you go for, the bit unknown, but where in theory the potential is much greater in terms of the finance potential. Actually, I think probably at Innovator it's not as great as it would be in other places. But as well, they do genuinely seem to be big on the work-life balance, which you never know until you get somewhere. I can't think you could apply anywhere where they wouldn't say they have good work-life balance. I literally
it's either implicit or...
Yeah.
It's mandatory to just put it.
Yeah, they have to say it. Like, you can't advertise a job and say work-life balance is very bad. I think unless you're going in to be like a city trader where you're going to earn a fortune, but there's a cost to pay, which is your health and your life. Yeah. So I didn't really... I think when it came to that one, I didn't know. And in the end, I spoke with Nicola a lot. We went back round and she said, look, you left teaching for a reason. So maybe give this other place a go and see, and if you don't like it, just do something else. That's always her mantra. Like, if you don't like it, just change it up. Like,
I think that's good wisdom.
You don't have to be, don't feel like you're, and it's always my advice at careers events, you can feel like at the age of 21, 22, you need to be on a linear upward trajectory for the whole of your life. But the reality is that doesn't happen for people. You can't imagine at the moment what situation you'll be in 10, 15 years time, and your circumstances that will drive your decision-making process will be completely different.
Yeah.
So,
and certainly there are certain realities in the world right now which mean that it's just going to become increasingly necessary to adapt and switch your career path.
Exactly. I think that's the same. Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that is, I guess through history since the Industrial Revolution, for certain areas of society, that's been a constant driver that things are changing. So like the steel workers in Sheffield or the coal miners that have been forced to change their trajectory in their complete life, really, and the geographies where they live because of changes in the world. Whereas now I think with, I don't know, we're going to have a learning session about it soon at work, I think, on AI. But where that is going, that seems that that's going to actually cut across all levels of society in terms of changing what we do and how we do it. And so that idea, and the welfare state and being supported into a pension, I don't know if I'll ever be able to retire. So I think that idea of being able to switch and, not worry too much about it, I think is a good thing. So it is, don't get me wrong, I don't like change. I think I would be, I think as a personality trait, if I was to do one of those tests, change would be pretty low down the things. I like things to be consistent, but I have made pretty big changes. But always try to make the best decision you can at the time. And of course I reflect on it. Like at the moment is not an easy time for consultancy in the world. And so there have been some times at work where I thought I think I've made the wrong decision. I think I should have gone to Anglia Ruskin, where I would have been safe. I would have known the salary I'm going to keep getting, and there's zero chance that you're going to lose my job. Not that I think that's the case at Innovator, but you see it in the news. There was an article just this week, I think, about consultancy, and now it's like, shrinking industry at the moment. So yeah, something I'm still wrestling with. But that's then going back to the meaning, is like getting into the flow and thinking about what's significant, and you're not worrying too much about the decisions you've made that you can't change, but just more focusing on the now and not worrying too much about the future either, which is...
I recently heard that I think Singapore have become, I think, the first place in the world to start to re-educate their older population in terms of digital literacy. So they recognize that, there's just a huge amount that is very, very different now about the way that the world operates, which older folks won't necessarily have a clue. Yeah. And they're actually going to educate them, I think, for free on things like AI and general digital literacy. Well, so I wonder if that's going to become more of a thing generally, not just for digital literacy, but to help people adapt between.
It'd be very interesting to see if they do invest in something like that, which would be very forward thinking. But
you were saying how you didn't necessarily have a clear idea when you were a kid about exactly what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think the assumption that most people make is you want to push kids to make that decision because it helps clarify certain decisions. But from what you were saying, I can also see why it's actually quite advantageous sometimes and quite liberating to not hold on too tightly to a specific future identity or future version of yourself.
Yeah.
Like not defining yourself too narrow, not defining success too narrow, and not holding too many attachments to a certain vision means that you can be more objective in your process, like you were saying, with breaking down the radius and, you know, all these like more concrete necessities. I think that's quite a powerful lesson, or like a contrast to the norm, but typically.
I think it's something that it took me a long time to... When I started teaching, I thought, well, this would be great. I'll do it for 40 years and I'll retire. Maybe I'll be a head teacher one day. But I'm not too... I think the first few meetings I had, I was like genuinely, again, it looks like rose-tinted glasses, but they said, what do you want to achieve? I was like, I just want to be a good teacher. And at the time there was a track where you could become an advanced skills teacher, an AST. So you were just like seen as really good at your subject and teaching it. And I was like, do you know, I just want to be that. That'll be fantastic. Be really good at my job and really effective. The thought of like doing a PhD in Cambridge or being a consultant for Innovator technology, I just could not have even comprehended that at 22. Which I think is that, it'd always be my advice. Don't have plans, of course. I mean, I wouldn't be advocating for having no plans and just like literally living by the seat of your pants. Because that wouldn't be me either. I'm very I really am very risk averse. But I think as well, like, don't worry too much about like the distant future. Like, think about now and, you know, maybe a year or two. But otherwise don't worry. And I would have said to students I taught, it's kind of what I did because I didn't know what I wanted to do when it came to GCSE options and A-level. I tried to keep things broad so that you weren't closing down paths. And what I've learned from being an academic is actually you really don't close down anything until you finish your PhD and do a postdoc. I think even at that stage, you can branch out and do different things. Yes, of course, things narrow down. But I think we can have this vision in our head that like you make a decision and that's closed off a load of doors. And actually the answer is it probably hasn't. Because under all of these things, there's the underlying skills that are actually very transferable and useful, but are quite hard to see yourself until someone else tells you about them.
Well, let me tell you some stuff. Well, let me point some things out that I think I admire quite strongly. And I guess it's a good way to wrap this up is clearly from the experiences that you've shared and obviously lived so far. I think there's some amazing qualities that come out. So obviously being a captain, being a role model, being a leader, but also having this sense of being humble and grounded in reality and empathetic to people, understanding what it is that they need. I think all of this basically contributes to this feeling whenever I spend time with you, whenever I spend time listening to you, is I just feel quite reassured and relaxed and quite inspired. And yeah, I just enjoy your company a lot. And I learn a huge amount from you, I think, because you're such a good communicator and you're obviously incredibly competent in a lot of different areas, but also just incredibly curious. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story and pulling out some of the meaningful aspects of your life. And yeah, I'd love to deep dive on some other stuff at some point in the future. But for now, thanks for coming. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, those are very kind words, Osama. Thank you. And thank you very much for having me. It's definitely made me, like, between the first discussion and today, I've thought an awful lot about things that I hadn't necessarily thought about before, which I think is actually a good thing. So
excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm glad to hear it. Right, shall we have some cottage pie?
Yes.
Excellent.
Nice one.
If you're curious to learn more about the pieces we've created in response to this discussion, or you'd like to explore the full archive of pieces on our website, you can find a link in the description. We'd love to know whether any of the pieces resonated with you and why that might be. Finally, we'd like to thank you for tuning in to the NAİMİ STUDİO podcast and for supporting our mission to help people cultivate meaning through creativity. Lots of love, and we'll see you later.